find adventure at the click of a button, or from the turn of a page, or the casting of a die. Join your hosts, Coniff and Shiloh, on an unforgettable journey. Questing the Multiverse.
Welcome to Questing the Multiverse, Episode 4. I'm your host, Shiloh, and with me is Master Coniff, or just Coniff.
Nowadays.
We just going by Coniff nowadays?
Yeah, you know, have I told you the story of the Xbox gamertag fiasco?
Actually, no, which is surprising.
Yeah, so, that is surprising.
Do tell.
Okay, so my gamertag is Master Coniff on Xbox, and it always has been as long as I can remember. As of 2016, I should say, because that's when I got an Xbox after getting married. And so a few years ago, I think like somewhere around 2020, 2021, when I was, starting to plan for a PC build and wanting to kind of just uniform my identity on, gaming spheres across console and platform alike, or console and PC alike, I was like, okay, I can get Coniff in like every game I play. So New World, RuneScape, what have you. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to change my gamer tag on Xbox to just Coniff. And so I go and, type it in. And as anyone who's been through the process knows, that if you type in a username that's already in use, it adds some letters to your name. Or not letters, numbers to your name at the end. And so I go and type in Coniff, and it was going to be Coniff 27960 or something. I was like, well, I hate having numbers in my gamer tag, so that's a no-go. But then I got curious. I was like, well, I do remember when I first set up my gamer tag in 2016 to play Overwatch, that I had originally messed up or something and had created another account by accident before I ended up with Master Coniff. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I actually did that, and I'm the one who's blocking myself from being able to change a name. And so I spent like an hour to 2 hours one night just trying to log in to the gamertag Coniff, and I even found it on Xbox, and it was a picture, like one of the little old Xbox picture profiles that you could choose from of the little wizard. And I was like, well, this has to be me. And so I'm like trying to log into this. And then eventually I log into that other account that I did end up making, but it wasn't Coniff. And so I was like, oh man, so maybe this isn't actually me. And so every time I've gone, and I tried this again late last fall, and every time I've gone to this account, it hasn't logged in since like 2017 or something, and the last thing it was doing was Minecraft. And so I'm like, it could still be me somehow, that I just don't realize it, but I don't think so. And so I even sent a message to this Coniff and was like, hey, can I have your gamer tag? Real
Hey, kid.
Yeah, like greedy, like. So I don't know. So as far as like everywhere else, Coniff, and that is the long-winded tale of why my Xbox tag has yet to change.
All right.
But as Shiloh said, welcome to episode 4, where we dive into the greatest game of the year. Probably, I think so. Shiloh, what have you got for us today? What are we going to kick this thing off with?
How about a little community update 23? Want to talk about that?
Absolutely. Is this the first one they've put out since the game released?
Post-launch, possibly.
It's hard to find.
It's definitely
that
in
stuff.
depth.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much of this you want to cover. I'm not reading all of the fine print.
Yeah, don't read all the text.
I'm gonna scroll through here. This is.
I would say just take a look at the. Let's do the graphs. I think that would be a good.
Let's do pictures. We can do pictures. Good.
Pictures are easy.
Yeah,
pictures easy.
Pictures. Pictures good. So the first one that pops up are race choices. So they've compiled a list of all of the concurrent players, which let's see, the new total, the grand total is what? What am I looking at? 815,000 concurrent players.
Yeah, but that was the last peak. There is an update on that.
To 821 or something like that?
No, I think it's 875.
Holy.
And Hogwarts Legacy is just at 879. So today...
So we got to take down Harry Potter, man. Let's go.
Shouldn't be hard with the wizards in
Dragonborn.
D&D.
We have more fuel to burn Hogwarts than... I'm just kidding. Those... Anyway. Okay. So race choices. We have... what would you think would have been the top race, like off the top of your head? Like if you were to think, I wonder what most players would have chosen.
Probably just elf or human. Like, honestly. Just because human is the easiest to make a character that you like the look of.
Yeah.
Or most people would like the look of. And then elf is probably second to that.
Second. Well... You're right, because the first one was half elf. So
combined.
Yeah, there you go. Now amalgam of both, and it wasn't by much. So you have half elf leading the charge at, I don't know if they have the actual numbers here, but they're very, very neck and neck. These three, half elf, human being second, and then elf being third, and then I guess you would consider this the second tier of most popular.
Yep.
Races were Dragonborn,
which
kind of
surprised me. But I guess that it would probably be because it wasn't available in early access.
Yeah.
So for the people that had been playing for years, Dragonborn was the new thing to dive into.
Yeah.
Which, when we get to classes, actually surprises me because of the monk class. But we'll get there.
Yeah. Tiefling didn't really surprise me. It was definitely I was really considering rolling up a tiefling because I do love tieflings. Drow, which surprised me that Drow is so low. I thought Drow would have been 1 or 2, considering Drist and all of that, and the popularity of dark elves and edgelords and that sort of thing. That would be the second tier. Well, I don't hate tier lists, but
no, you're right though, and especially the way the graph lines up here. And again, listener, for all these links and stuff, when we talk about them in the episode, you'll be able to find them in our Discord server. That there's a channel that we go and post this stuff into, so you can look at it and then discuss it in the QTM discussion channel. But so the way that this graph looks, it's very clear that there are 3 different tiers. There's the most popular, the middle, and then the least popular.
Yeah, and then there's 5 least popular. Half orc would be the leading charge of the third tier. Dwarf right behind that. Gnome, halfling, and Githyanki, my poor Githyanki brethren.
I am surprised that dwarf is so low, though, because that's typically a class that I feel like in fantasy settings, a race, that people just love to play.
Yeah.
If they're going to play one of the smaller races, dwarf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm surprised gnome is above halfling, but, that's like, I don't know. That's like peaches and nectarines, it's not really much of a difference.
Yeah.
They're small peoples. Anyway, so that is their little compiled chart of the
races,
numbers here of the races. The classes here, one is by far leading, and most of them are kind of neck and neck.
This kind of surprised me, though. Like the number 1 is what it is.
Yeah, the first one is Paladin, which really surprised me too, because I don't know, I've just never been a huge fan of the Paladin. They're just either, I guess, because you can roll up an Oathbreaker Paladin, which is kind of almost like an anti-Paladin, which is kind of cool, a little bit less do-goody than a normal paladin.
Goody two shoes.
Yeah. Like, what's his face from Honor Among Thieves?
Oh,
Chris Pine is joking. Is like he walks so straight.
is it like Zarek or something? I literally just watched this movie a week ago when I was waiting for this episode to upload.
He just walks over the boulder.
Yeah,
just
and he's over it.
There he goes.
It's true. That's a good point, though. Like, and I don't think I don't think the movie had anything to do with that at all. I don't think Shiloh was making that claim at all. But just to put that out there, I don't think like Honor Among Thieves or I really don't think any particular outside medium was influencing what people were playing. And so for me, Paladin is significantly higher than the next highest class, which is Sorcerer, which has got a sizable lead against Warlock. And then the next 8 are basically neck and neck, it looks like.
Yeah.
So if you want to just read them off, and then we'll get to the last one.
So you have Paladin leading the charge, Sorcerer, Warlock would be third, and then Rogue, Bard, Barbarian, Fighter, Ranger, Wizard, Monk, and Druid, in that order, are all fairly neck and neck. So it's just, what flavor of the, not month, but what flavor of class do you want to play? And that's, this is really kind of interesting. And then Cleric at the very, very bottom, which is also fairly interesting.
I wonder if that's because many people probably bring Shadowheart with them. Mm-hmm. And since she is a dark cleric, she gets into some of the necromancy powers. This is my understanding, especially having her in my party. But what's odd to me is that cleric is like almost, a little over half of what the next lowest is, which is druid. So there's a sizable drop off from druid to cleric. But also the fact that druid would be second to last is kind of surprising. And then, as I mentioned with race, with Dragonborn, I'm surprised monk is third to last, because I would expect that's the only new class, like completely new class out of early access. I would figure that would have been up there, for people who wanted to play. Same logic as Dragonborn, but who knows?
Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, let's move along to the next one. It's a number of origin characters created. So the first stat is that 93% of players rolled custom TAVs, or if you're not familiar with the
I was going to ask
lingo,
you what that means.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with the lingo of Baldur's Gate 3, if you roll up, I guess it became a running joke of if you roll up your character, if you rolled up a character in early access, a lot of people would forget to even type a name for their character. And the default name is Tav.
So, I didn't notice that, but that's a good point.
Yeah. So if you ever see, I don't know, a YouTuber or something running around with a Tav, they just didn't type their name in to that character. So, but out of the 7%, these are the numbers. So Gale was the most chosen of the number of origin characters created, which is kind of surprising. Maybe not so. I don't know.
I guess, is Wizard a pretty popular class in like pen and paper tabletop version? Because I feel like I would end up rolling a Wizard, but the whole Wizard shtick has been my thing for a long time. There's a backstory to that. Mm-hmm. The real short of it is that I played guitar in college, and my nickname from my floor mates was the Wizard. Ooh. So, anyway.
You play a mean pinball?
Pinball Wizard.
The second of the chosen between the 7% of players that did not roll up or a chosen custom character was Karlach. And then Asterion, Shadowheart, Will, and Liazel, my poor Liazel.
Wonder why they
very bottom.
Wonder why they didn't include the Dark Urge on this, because I know the Dark Urge is a custom character. Can you roll the Dark Urge with
as
another
an origin character? No, not as an origin character. So it has to be a custom.
But they don't even mention. I'm reading the text. They don't even mention the Dark Urge. So that 93%. I wonder.
With Dark Urge characters are included into that.
I would like to see the breakdown. Of that too.
Between. Yeah, because I guess they consider the Dark Urge a kind of an amped up background story more than an actual origin character,
which we'll get to in our multiplayer coverage later on in the episode, won't we, Shiloh? One thing I did want to read here that they wrote in this community update is that based on how this played out with our previous game, Divinity Original Sin 2, players will often embark upon their first playthrough with a custom character, and then, once they've gotten to know them a little better, play their second with one of the origins as their avatar. That is exactly what I did in Divinity 2. Now, and this might be a tangent, but that's what we do here at Questing the Multiverse. And I'm curious to hear Shiloh's thoughts as well. We both played Divinity Original Sin 2 one time through, and it took me 95 hours or 93 hours and Shiloh over 100. And again, custom characters. Now, if you were to go play that game again, if you could manage to convince yourself to do it after having played Baldur's Gate 3, which I think we wouldn't even tease, but we talked about it last episode at how like this game, Baldur's Gate 3, is going to make it really difficult to go back and play Divinity 2. I think I could do it for the stories and the characters because they are very different, and the story is very different, and the whole source situation going on in Divinity is rather interesting. But if you were going to go play it again, would you make another custom character, or would you pick one of those starting 6? And if so, which one?
Ooh. I would probably go back and play as Fane.
Okay.
Just because he was not anywhere even close to making it into my group.
Your group.
I just cast him to the side and said, we're good. Because I rolled up a blood mage, and so just didn't really necessarily need him in the party. Even though, in that game you had the opportunity to customize or re-roll or respec, as it were.
That's a good point, because I did the same. I didn't make a blood mage, but I made a wizard that my intent was to go with the 4 elements, and I ended up more fire, earth, and then some of the necromancy. At any rate, I did end up playing I got to Fort Joy with Losa, and so that's the only other playthrough I have started with that game. So, but I agree with Fane. I think he'd probably be a good pick. And I've heard that his story is pretty exceptional. And after having beaten the game, I know a thing or two about how it ties in. And it would be very interesting to play through it in that, as him, getting to experience that stuff. But yeah. So anyway, I do know, as we've talked about, we've got our single player playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3 where both Shiloh and I, and we're going to talk about that a little later on. We're both a lot farther than we are in any multiplayer session. But then if I were to play it again, I probably would, if you were going to play as an origin character, which one would you pick? Mine would probably end up being either, I might play as Lizelle. It'd either be her or Will. Now, this is the Dark Urge aside, because that has to be a custom character. But if I was going to play as one of the 6 origin characters, it would probably be one of those 2. Will's backstory and current happening story in my playthrough is rather interesting. There's a bit of a, drama there involved. And of course, part of that's with Karlach, but most of it is with another character.
Yeah.
Lizelle, I just don't know enough about. And so I think, like, if I wanted, like, the most fresh playthrough or the most new experience, Lizelle probably would be the one to give me that. So,
yeah. On the opposite side of the coin, I would have to go with Shadowheart, and there's a reason for that, and she's... we'll get to that in a little bit. But,
I think I know why, but since I'm playing so heavily with her in my party at the moment, I feel like I'm getting to experience it. But all right,
yep,
that was class.
That's all I'll say for now.
Characters, race. What about the opening weekend in Numbers, Shiloh? This was a huge weekend, the opening weekend for the game. Of course, at the time that you're listening to this episode, the opening weekend's come and gone, and now we've moved into the second weekend. And so this is a quite astronomical data here, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. First of all, I think the players have played for at least, God, what is this?
It's 10 million.
10 million hours. Or, if math is hard, like it is for me sometimes, that is basically 1,225 years. So, since launch.
Which is 12 and a quarter centuries, if you need the breakdown.
Yeah, if you really want the breakdown, the nickels and dimes.
And that's just about 1.25 millennia.
Yeah. How many minutes?
It's true though. I mean, like, you look at 10 million hours and you're like, I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know how that
what
relates
does that mean?
to me.
That's a lot of hours.
But that's mind-boggling. And that was just the opening weekend. So, of course, that number is going to skyrocket because all those same people are, except for, and we'll get to that number later, the 368 people that have beaten the game already. All those, that 10 million hours is from people that are still playing the game. And like Shiloh and I, still playing the game a week and a half after launch. So,
yeah. Oh, God. Yeah, so there's this 368 of you have finished this game and are done with the podcast. So congratulations. You don't have to listen to us anymore until the next game we cover. But that's insane. Honestly, if you look at the numbers and concurrent players or just players in general, in any other game, even MMOs, where you have, I would say, 10 to 20% sometimes of players reach like max pinnacle, status. 368 of whatever, we'll just say almost a million. 875.
That's just concurrent too. Yeah.
Yeah. 368 is not 10 to 20%. So, Larian just says, hats off to you, but wow, I mean, that's just insane. I don't know how there aren't even enough hours in a day I guess there are technically, but that's just nonstop playing for 24 hours, 3 days straight.
I did want to jump back to the other numbers that 65% of players early on in the game, there's a location called the Grove, and you can either assault it with another character or save it. So 65% of people saved it, which is the veering on the side of the good, versus the 34.9 that assaulted it, which is veering on the side of the bad. A better statistic is that Scratch, everyone's favorite dog, has been petted over 750,000 times, cementing his reputation as the goodest boy in all the realms. And then with that, I guess 1.4 million people have spoken with corpses. I only spoke with one corpse, and that was in the Underdark. So no, actually it wasn't. It was just recently in Act 2. But more importantly, and I think this goes hand in hand with Scratch, 2.4 million people have talked with animals. And if you had played Divinity Original Sin 2, you would know that talking with animals is
Big deal
almost
and fun.
better than talking with humans or other humanoid races at times. So
Yeah, it just says next time somebody starts bragging about being fluent in 9 languages, ask them if any of those include squirrel.
which I think I found the voice actor that played Sir Laura in Divinity Original Sin 2 in this game. I don't know for sure, but I think it's the character His Majesty. Have you come across His Majesty yet?
It sounds familiar.
I don't want to spoil it, so I'll mention it off air. But
yeah, don't spoil it for the listener.
but the character is. It doesn't surprise me at all. And if I was that voice actor and they're like, do you want to voice another character for our game? This is the character. I would have instantly said yes. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and the
Who
Sir
wouldn't say
Laura
no?
character is a lot of people didn't like him in Divinity Original Sin 2, but I actually thought he
What?
was fantastic. So what else do we have here on
Oh, nearly 10% of characters spent at least an hour in character creation.
Oh, actually, so look at this. It says so it was over we said 1,225 years playing. 88 of those years were in character creation.
Well, it takes a while to go to birth to, have a child. Wow, here's an interesting stat. And then we can move along, I suppose, unless you find another one that... oh, here we go. Here's one that should speak to you. Of all player deaths, 12% were caused by friendly fire. Nice spell casting there, Dave.
So that happened to me a ton in Divinity Original Sin 2. And
yeah.
I think something that Larian made a point of changing between that game and this game is just how many surface environment type situations they have. So like in Divinity, everything seemed to be on fire or on ice or poison or whatever. And so the Red Prince in my party, sorry, but I was lighting everything on fire and he just happened to walk into it 24/7. So that hasn't happened very often in Baldur's Gate 3 for me. So but
my character is a warlock, and they're very, very focused fire. They do have some AoE, and I've just found the magic of there's a lightning, concentrated lightning spell that I've been using. That's just really, really fun.
Yeah.
But it is very, very small in area of effect and very concentrated. But you can kind of get 2 or 3, and you can get friendly fire, but you can. Click and drag the AoE.
Yes.
And kind of make it to where it doesn't really hit
Now,
as many people.
I did mention last episode that I have killed Gale a few times from friendly fire.
A few.
But I thought I was reading that statistic as like my personal character, and I don't think that's happened yet. But I have killed Gale with thunder, whatever that ground AoE thunder attack is that wizards have early on, or whomever. The last statistic that I do want to mention here is 1 NPC was shoved into a chasm for every concurrent player we had during our peak on the first weekend Sunday, which was 815,000. And I have to say, I was sitting in, I think it was last night, I was in Discord, and our friend Goo was in Discord, and he's been playing this too, and we mentioned him last episode, and he's not really into, or rather he's never had an experience with these type of games, and so he's been having a blast with it. And he said last night, he just, it's quiet in Discord when you're playing this game because everybody's doing their own thing, listening to cutscene dialogue, making decisions, whatever. And so it's quiet. And then all of a sudden he just starts laughing. And he's like, I just pushed this guy into a chasm. And I was like, yeah, I get it, Goo. And so it's just a incredibly entertaining aspect of combat in this game, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I'm super happy they put it in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man. Okay. Where I feel like we could honestly probably just do an entire episode on this update, but we've got so much more.
Yeah, it's a bunch of numbers, and really we'll post it in, like Coniff said, in the in our Discord, Questing the Multiverse, and QTM info and links, and I think it's under discussion, right? Or we can,
it has its own
we can
channel.
talk about it in discussion.
Yep.
Yeah, we have the separate links
Separate
for all the links and stuff.
I did want to switch to our next topic because I want to keep this one brief because we already discussed this in episode 2, I think it was. The discourse surrounding this game, setting expectations, if you thought it was going to die down by the time the game released, you were way incorrect. If anything, it's reached a fever pitch, and IGN put out a video saying Baldur's Gate 3 is causing devs to panic. And many people, Asmongold, Aztec Cross, ton of content creators, Paul Tassi, they've all responded to this video in their own ways. Well, a ton of software engineers, for these, video game developers have also responded. Many of them are just trying to explain things from their perspective. But I think there's a comment that doesn't necessarily tie into this, but kind of sums up the way I feel about this game. That was on, I think it was Asmongold's reaction to this video. But as for the topic of the video itself, I think I have to side with the consumer, right? I'm not an engineer. I have some understanding of how difficult it is to, develop something like this. I've got friends who are software engineers, and as content creators, the amount of work you put in for a 1-hour episode or a 2-hour episode is way more than 2 hours. And so I understand where they're coming from, as far as the game is exceptionally well made, and that definitely is what people would probably say is a miracle, that it exists. But at the same time, I'm I don't care that, of the excuses. A AAA developer with double the amount of engineers working on a game, designers, with double the budget, should be able to put out a game as good as Baldur's Gate 3. Now, what I guess, again, we've talked about this, but what's your knee-jerk reaction?
I think that Asmongold kind of hit it on the head with his comment of, just quit whining. And in the video, he mentions, people will mention Larian is a huge studio with, all these assets and all. And it's maybe if you're a studio of 5 trying to make a CRPG, that makes sense. But these companies that are, what is their excuse? He mentions, Blizzard has 8,000 employees or something like that. Bungie has over 1,000, and this guy, Destin, I forget his last name. But anyway, his first name is Destin. I do know that. He used to run a Destiny 2 podcast for IGN, and so he knows Bungie pretty well. And I think he mentioned later, he's I basically played maybe 2 weeks of Lightfall.
Oh, yes.
And he got his fill out of that. So he knows a thing or two about putting these companies into in their place, and kind of throws some shade at Diablo a little bit at the very end there, where he's talking about, if you're happy with spending your $100+ on Diablo 4 and getting a cosmetic pet mount or your horse mount, skin and
all that extra stuff.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. But and also hit Asmongold's little knee-jerk reaction at the what is it, the all inclusive, like ready to go kind of game. Had brought him
feature
back,
complete.
That term, feature complete, brought him back to a time of like 2001, and I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, this is a. I hope that this trend, or not necessarily this trend, but between Baldur's Gate 3 and Elden Ring is another one that we've mentioned, and he mentions in the video as well as Remnant 2.
Mm-hmm.
These games are going to kind of, excuse the French, but give some of these AAA developers a good swift kick in the nuts, because what they don't want to hear, and the reason why they're maybe pushing back a little bit, it's because people are sick and tired of it, and they if you poo-poo on their games, or if you like a game other than what they're putting out, well, they're getting defensive, and that's what all this is. So
yeah. And on one hand, like, I do understand some of the defense about it, because a lot of those developers, let's say for Blizzard or like EA, they're like, okay, so let me put it this way. Larian puts out a game, the only person they answer to is the consumer
themselves. Yeah.
Blizzard or EA, they put out a game, they have to answer to a board of directors who answer to shareholders, and shareholders want to make money. That's the whole purpose. Yeah. And so I don't blame the developers by any stretch of the imagination. We all saw what happened to Cyberpunk. We all saw what happened to Fallout 76. Both CD Projekt Red and Bethesda had to answer to someone else. I think CD Projekt Red is owned by someone, or hopefully I'm not just misinformation on that. But my point is, that's where I think the problem lies. And we had a great discussion about this on the Discord, the QTM discussion channel. And one of my friends, Moses, made the point that, like, companies have gotten really used to the short-term success model. And so, like, they'll put out a game that they know will make a good chunk of money, but then in a year's time, there's a new one. We've talked about that with Call of Duty, FIFA, Madden, even like the Formula One game that Swine and I like to play. Mm-hmm. Any game that is new, they come out with something new each year.
Yeah, Call of Duty could be thrown into that category as well. And Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, and so it's
example after example, but go on.
Well, it's like, but the problem is it works. And I think that's what consumers are fed up with. We understand that when you work for a big company, you answer to more than just your boss, your boss's boss, all the way up to the CEO. They're answering to the dollar sign. And putting out a game that works, that has hype, that makes a bunch of money, but then isn't feature complete, like, it works. The reason it's done is because it works. People pay for it. People pay for the microtransactions. They simply do. I've paid for microtransactions in various games over the years. Mm-hmm. And so to see a game come out that is 100%, you pay your $70, you get Baldur's Gate 3, the sheer amount of content in that game probably blows Red Dead Redemption 2 out of the water. And I think that game is pretty highly praised for being extremely, feature complete, the single player aspect. Mm-hmm. And so this discourse isn't going away. it's going to be talked about months and months and months down the road because, face it, Baldur's Gate 3 is a industry, it's a shaker. The game has come in, it's shaken up the old guard because suddenly this largely unknown studio before this has put out a game that millions of people are lauding as the game of the year and the game of the decade so far. Yep. Even higher than Elden Ring. So this guy in the Asmongold's video made this comment that I really resonated with. And it said, "This game just about single-handedly opened my eyes to the reality of modern gaming. We've all known it, but this game really made me feel it. It actually made me feel like I'm not just simply getting older and enjoying games less. It feels like this is what old school gaming should have evolved into. I feel like Larian is Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting, telling me that it's not my fault." And
very true.
The resonation for me was mostly like, we've talked about this with you and I, Swampy, our ESO friends, our friends in Guild Wars 2, and around that, like, man, games just aren't hitting like they used to. It's probably we're just getting older. No, it's because games have evolved to not inspire as much excitement or imagination as they used to. So,
yep.
Shout out to Baldur's Gate 3 for making us feel young again.
Even an old soul like me.
All right.
Man.
Is it time?
I believe so.
Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've been waiting for. Video Game Face-Off!
Video Game Face-Off matchup number 2. We actually didn't tease this at the end of last episode, and we just kind of threw it in here because we want to do a lore dive into the Underdark, but Shiloh needs some time to prepare, so we're going to move that to episode 5, and then this matchup to episode today. The one you're listening, episode current.
Today.
So this matchup is Half-Life 2 versus Monster Hunter World. Now, I may have mentioned, but we've moved into the multiplayer RPG, and you might be asking yourself, Coniff, Half-Life 2 multiplayer RPG? So I can explain what happened, and you'll probably get a glimpse of this in the next matchup. But one, I was trying to group games into the 4 different regions on the 64 seed bracket, and I had to come up with something that loosely associated games into a particular quadrant. But I think I accidentally mixed up Half-Life 2 and the game that will be in the next matchup, which is sitting in the single-player RPG only category. We'll get to that at the end of the segment. But also, like, Half-Life 2 does have a deathmatch. It just happens to be technically a separate game. Whereas Half-Life 1, which came out in the 90s, it also had the same thing, but then on the PS2, it also had a multiplayer co-op mode. So I think I got it all confused, which is no surprise.
Yeah, it's been a while.
So I'm going to go over what is Half-Life 2, brief elevator pitch. You're going to go over what is Monster Hunter World, and then we're going to gut instinct pick, and then we're going to go through the video game face-off rating system quickly, and then I'm also going to explain a little bit about the discussion I had involving that and how we could make it more fair in the time played category, which may shake up our first matchup. We'll get there. Okay. So Half-Life 2 is the sequel to the award-winning and great game of Half-Life. Half-Life is arguably the game that put Valve on the map, and for all we know is the butterfly effect as to why most of us have Steam profiles and are playing Baldur's Gate 3 on Steam at the moment. So Valve owns Steam, and Half-Life was kind of their first big game. Half-Life 2 took things up a notch by introducing the player to City 17, which was, Half-Life 1, you're in the Black Mesa Research Facility. You kind of move around it into the desert, and then you go to Zen, which is the alien world. Half-Life 2 takes place on Earth again in City 17, which has been taken over by the Combine, which effectively are an alien race that are trying to take over the world. I don't remember the guy's name for some reason. I literally just played this game this summer. And for whatever reason, Andrew Ryan's in my head, but I know he's the antagonist of Bioshock. Yeah. So it's some doctor is his name. I don't know. It doesn't matter in Half-Life 2. So you play as Gordon Freeman again, and effectively you're going to adventure in this post-apocalyptic City 17 and then the outskirts. And it's a great game. It's honestly one of the best single-player shooting RPGs that has ever existed. The deathmatch is just typical Valve deathmatch, which gave way to things like Gary's Mod, or Valve got smart quickly and just decided to make Team Fortress Counter-Strike. And so that's what most people know as their multiplayer part. And so the multiplayer in Half-Life 2 is largely forgettable.
Yeah.
But the single player game and the experience of the game in general was just fantastic. So it's on Steam, it's cheap. I mean, most gamers have heard of the series Half-Life. There's a whole joke which, has evolved into Valve can't count to 3 because they never released Half-Life 3. In fact, they never even released 3 of anything. And so that's where, the joke has manifested. But what is Monster Hunter World, Shiloh?
So the Monster Hunter franchise, I don't know a ton about. I know that there are probably a lot of avid fans of their earlier games, but in principle, it's a kind of a JRPG where you land and basically hunt dinosaurs or other mythical creatures for their parts, which you then basically craft into swords or weird looking armor pieces that have different effects on them. And the kind of the MO of the game, at least for Monster Hunter World, combat is almost like I guess the best way to describe it, or at least in my opinion, is kind of a clunky Souls-like.
Yeah, which is a lot
monster.
More forgiving.
Yeah, it's a little bit more, a lot more forgiving than a typical Souls game. But at the same time, it's the clunkiness of it, because most of the time you're either swinging a hammer the size of a Chevy Buick or something, or you're I don't know. It's fairly clunky. But anyway, the multiplayer is not great, but the combat and the actual hunting down of the monsters is pretty premier. Like, it's really, really good. I don't think there have been several. It's kind of its own genre, really. It's kind of created that Monster Hunter genre, which other games like Dauntless, there's a new one that just came out.
Atlas Fallen.
Well, Atlas Fallen, yeah, that one looks very promising. I've yet to play it. Stark, you have to tell us how it is.
He says, well, if you want to know, we'll just bury the lead right here. He played it a bit, and he was back in Remnant 2 with his son within the same day. So it's not a bad game, but I've heard the story is really lackluster and just kind of
that would describe the story in Monster Hunter World.
That's
a good segment. So, yeah, but It's a great game if you want to go in and just challenge yourself to beat some of these monsters. When you can get into multiplayer, and it's sad that it is so wonky to try to get into multiplayer. But if you could, it could lead to a lot of fun. Really, I mean, if this game had a better system in general, which I've heard that Rise is a lot better with that, but I have yet to play Rise. So
yeah, there's a lot of quality life stuff they need to work on. So
yeah,
what's your gut instinct pick? Have you played Half-Life 2?
Yes.
Oh,
way back in the day.
What's your gut instinct pick?
Half-Life 2. And that's just because I know what that game did for that, and that game in BioShock really opened up the doors to a first-person RPG that I truly enjoyed. Like that, I'm not a first-person shooter competitive player at all, but that has been established. And if you didn't know that, well, now you do. I don't play COD. I don't play a lot of that stuff. If I play a first-person shooter, I'm in it for story, environment, gameplay. I don't mind. I like shooting and I like the first-person elements of it, but the co-op part of it, I could care less for.
Yes.
So this type of game was kind of a breath of fresh air, and I know that the original Half-Life was in the 90s, but this game also kind of had I know the facial recognition of the main, whatever the doctor or whatever.
Dr. Briner? Kleiner?
Yeah.
No, I like the names.
It was pretty cutting edge for its time.
Yeah.
And
again, this is a 2004 game as well, so
Yeah.
this is World of Warcraft era.
And I guess it still holds up. I mean, I haven't played it since about that time, so
It
sort of.
So I went from playing Black Mesa, which was a Half-Life remake from 2020 or 2021 by a completely different development team than Valve.
Mm-hmm.
And that game looked great. And of course, like when you first played the original Half-Life, it looked like a 90s shooter, like Quake. Just, it was pretty revolutionary in the fact that it was 3D environments, that looked good for the time. Half-Life 2 comes out, it looks way better, way more realistic than the original Half-Life, again, 2004. And it also came out on console, and so at the time it looked pretty great. Well, playing this remake that looks good by today's standards, and then going back, because there is no remake for Half-Life 2, going back to the 2004 version of Half-Life 2 was a bit jarring. So stand up,
Subject.
it's getting to the point where it's starting to look really old, which is weird to say because, again, at the time it was a huge improvement in graphics in 2004. I mean, everyone knows what World of Warcraft looked like. I think one of the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic was out around the same time, and Half-Life 2 looked way better. So anyway, Half-Life 2 is also probably one of, would be in most people's top 100 games of all time. So for it to go up against Monster Hunter World is a bit, Monster Hunter World had a uphill battle. And unfortunately, my gut instinct is also Half-Life 2, which means for the sake of the bracket, Half-Life 2 is going to move on.
Yep. No rating system needed.
So no rating system needed. We'll go ahead and rate it off air, both the games, just to give them a score.
We won't bore you with it.
But I did want to lead into what the discussion I had was. So a comment was made that the time played metric is a little unfair. And I kind of alluded to that accidentally in the first matchup when I made the mistake of saying Destiny 2 got a 79 and then Hell Let Loose got an 81. but I was incorrectly at the time reading the score without the time played metric. If you included the time played metric, Hell Let Loose drops to an 80.9 and Destiny 2 goes up to an 81.7. Well, a compromise was determined that, and that was if neither of us have played a game, which may end up being the case for one of these, and you might be saying, well, how can you accurately choose if you've both never played? Well, the answer to that is because it's our podcast and we can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
But also, this is more of just a fun matchup, and it's what we personally think is the better game, right?
Yeah.
And so if we've never played, or one of us has not played one of the games, or both of us, it was decided that we remove the time played metric from the equation. In which case, we have to retroactively give Hell Let Loose the win for the first matchup and knock Destiny 2 off. As if this is not controversial enough for our little podcast, I had a great discussion with Doctor, who we've talked about many times on our old podcast, GG Party Chat, who basically carried all of us through any raid experience any of us ever had in Destiny 2. The man knows more about Destiny 2 than most people. He made a lot of great comments on how Destiny 2 has really fallen down, I guess, the dark path of game development. And so that discussion also kind of put a damper on it. And I would say that, it's okay. Destiny 2 is in the last years of its life because their final expansion's coming out. And so, anyway, we're going to retroactively give Hell Let Loose the win because it did have a higher score if you just excluded the time played category. And we wanted to get this out now. I don't care if anyone feels like we cheated the system or whatever. I had to do it at some point, come up with a solution. And so that solution is, again, if neither of us or one of us hasn't played one of the games, we're going to exclude the time played metric. Because ultimately, time played is really not indicative of anything anyway, except how much we've wasted our time or not. So,
Yeah.
And so, of course, that is, most games, I would say I still put in a good chunk of hours, even if I don't end up thinking it's a great game, just because you want to fully explore what it is. So, All right. With that out of the way, again, Half-Life 2 wins and moves on to the next round. The next matchup, which won't be in next episode, but in a future episode, is Kingdom Hearts, the first one from 2002, versus Control from 2019. And this is why I think I mixed up Control and Half-Life 2 on which realm they were in, because Control does have a multiplayer element. I never played it. Yeah, it was through, it was like what'd they call those? There was some room in the oldest house that you'd go to that had like one of them glass, almost like a Faraday cage. And there were like the agents walking around with their little chest vest things on. And you could go in there and do like multiplayer missions that were maybe like mini raids. I'd have to look into it, but I never got to experience that, but it technically does. So anyway, next matchup, Kingdom Hearts versus Control. You know what time it is, Shiloh? The time we've all been waiting for.
Well, if it isn't our two illustrious adventurers, friends, you should read what they're really saying about you in the latest Baldur's Mouth.
What sort of wild tales are they spinning this time?
Grab a seat and I'll bring you some ale. Why don't you tell me what really happened?
Shiloh, how much time have you put in to Baldur's Gate 3 in, what is this, the week and a half it's been out-ish?
Yeah, I don't know how I've managed to come up with this number, but I really don't. Around 60 hours, and I think I just must be putting, and I'm going to guess maybe 2 of those hours might just be idle doing some other things.
Washing the dishes.
Yeah, and then going back and working on an inventory or something,
Oh, okay, yeah.
But for the most part, those 60 hours are pretty, they're pretty, not necessarily knuckle grinding it, but yeah, the fact that I pull off my full-time job and just plus overtime, it looks like this week, but I don't know how I've managed to do it, but 60 hours somehow. And I'm into Act 2, very beginning.
Okay.
So I'm about to storm some towers. We'll just say that. I won't try to spoil it for anyone. I'm level 6.5. So,
Okay. Do you remember what level you were when you left Act 1? Was
right
it
at
6?
Right at 6, I
Okay.
think. Yeah.
So
I've done a lot. I'm probably going to be on that 150 plus hour
which is
that they
insane.
mentioned. Yeah.
It's so good, though. I am at currently 42.3 hours, which that includes our 3-hour multiplayer
Yeah, so the
session.
60 hours does include that.
Yes.
So I don't know. We'd be like 50.
But that's still playtime,
Yeah. That is playtime.
No,
So
well, have you played more than one multiplayer adventure? Or just the one?
I've been cheating on you guys with that's the only one.
How could you?
How could you?
I did make it out of Act 1. I wouldn't say I'm ready to storm said towers, but I am like right there. And I am also about 6.5.
Okay.
Level
yeah.
6.5. So
That's pretty cool.
yeah. That's not bad.
So right there, you're seeing like the level of, we both had the same experience and same enjoyment. I probably went off and did some more side stuff that probably got me, because that's generally what I end up doing in these games.
But it kind of depends too, because and I think I have it written down somewhere.
But
Yeah.
the side stuff that I did, you probably did side stuff that I didn't do.
Exactly.
And then vice versa. Like I went a completely different route to get to said location. I think our friend Jeff probably can, I think he took the same route that I ended up taking. And a lot of that had to do with character backstories. So
Yeah, that's a good point, because, I'll just have to leave it at that. We are going to
There's a
have...
lot of spoilers
Yeah,
stuff.
we're
but
going to have
we'll
a
get to
little
that.
bit of a spoilery section later. It's not going to spoil story beats, specific things, but maybe like some locations. There is one really cool thing that happened to me recently in my single player game that I can't say because it involves a character that I didn't expect to see, but even my and I'll just bury it right now. It's not Dritzt. It's another character that I didn't expect to see that I knew the name of, and I was like, "Oh, that's that person." Wow.
I think I might know.
Yeah,
who you're talking about.
I would imagine you do, and we'll talk about it off air, and eventually we'll talk about it on air, listener. So you'll get to maybe hear some of that. But again, we want to be at least a little respectful of the people who can't play as much as we do, and a lot of people you only get to experience this type of game once in the way of like really experiencing it for the first time, that wonder, that sense of awe and fascination with things that happen. You know, how many people go back and say, man, I wish I could play through The Witcher 3 for the first time. You know, erase my memory of the game, go back and play it. Even I've said that. And so we want to be at least conscious of the fact that not everyone is where we're at. Many people, like our friend Jeff, are way beyond where we're at. And so we're just trying to keep most of that, you know, a secret and a surprise for you. So we'll get into some of it later, but
yeah, because I completely understand. Like, I've gone into this game completely different than I normally go into a lot of RPGs or certainly MMOs, where I'm researching and looking up stuff and finding out builds and doing all of that, you know, all the little nitpicky stuff that you see people do. I have done very, very little, if not at all. Like, I try to avoid it as much as I can, because I just want to go into the game and figure things out myself, or using the little bit of metagaming that I might have instilled by you know, years of playing D&D, but not necessarily being a rules lawyer. So you know, I'm having so much fun.
yes.
Just doing it the way I think they want you to do it by Larian standards. So
Yeah.
which is completely non-spoilery, trying to figure out things yourself, not what do they call that, save
scumming. Yeah.
save scumming, not doing that too much at all. So I'm just like, well, okay, that happened, I guess we're moving on, here we go. Which we'll get into one of my most memorable moments, and I was like, well, okay, that kind of sucks, but well,
so
it is what it is. So
I did have a random thought, and our next topic is just our thoughts versus multiplayer versus single player. But before, I didn't know where to stick this in the notes, so I'm just going to mention it now. And you might be able to shed some light on this as a D&D player, but coming from Divinity and coming from literally every other RPG that exists, that I can think of at least, I have been impressed that gear, like weapons and armor and jewelry and whatever, it doesn't have a gear score in this game. Like, it doesn't, like, it's not like this is a level 6 item or this is a level 4 item, or
can only be equipped by a level 4 paladin,
right,
et cetera, yeah.
And so it does have proficiency. So like and even in this game, like Shadowheart, I have this really cool helm that I got from one of my highlights that I'll mention, but it's heavy armor. And so I'm waiting for her level up to where I can maybe pick heavy proficiency just so she can wear it.
Yeah.
But other than that, like, there's no, like, it doesn't have a score. And so the nice thing about this is you could find like a really rare piece of gear at level 3 that you could use at level 12 if the effect is what you're after. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
D&D, other than having, and Larian removed some of this with when they kind of removed a lot of the classes have ability score prereqs in D&D, so cleric has to have, and a lot of this has to do with multi-classing. So if you have, say, a warlock has to have, I don't know the exact numbers, but their charisma is their primary stat, so they have to have 15 or 13. I think it's some sort of a base of like 13 to 15 usually.
Okay.
And so if you multi-class, you have to meet a certain prereq for that class. So if you're a warlock and you already have a pretty high charisma, but you want to multi-class as a fighter, it's going to be a little hard unless you have, say, a 12 or 13 strength, or you can find an item that will boost your strength, or pick a feat or something. So there's a little bit of trying to, figure out a little way to do that. Larian's kind of removed a lot of those prereqs for classes, to where you can kind of just make whatever you want for the most part. And you might be a little gimpy, but it's whatever you want to do. gear kind of works the same way. You know, if you find a magical item, chances are, you know, in D&D, you're not going to find, oh, well, you have to be level 4 to equip this wand of magic missiles. But you might have a particular, you might need I don't know. I don't think there really is. Like
it's just like the proficiencies with stuff. Like that's the only time I've ran into it is when an item is medium armor. And
if you're not strong enough to wield something, or you don't know how to do something, like if you can't use a greatsword, well, you're not going to find a magical greatsword that you can suddenly go, oh yeah, now all of a sudden I can really use this thing. No, you still got to learn how to use it. So same with, but you know, I think most people can use scrolls and things like that, but some magic items might have some prereqs as well, like you need a particular thing. Or
I just really like that system of doing things, like because the rarity system is still in the game, you know, like in this one, and it'll tell you like this is rare, this is uncommon, this is very rare, which is the helm that I'm talking about is listed as like very rare. It's the purple item or whatever, and I was like, man, I want this. And but it's nice. So, you know, like all I have to do is be able to add heavy proficiency to Shadowheart, and then she can wear it. And again, like that's because I'm running with myself, who's a bard. So light armor, Shadowheart that's medium, Asterion light, and then Gale. It's basically in robes and clothes. So
toilet paper.
Okay, yeah. So that's good to hear then. Shiloh, what is your opinion on single player versus multiplayer? Like, what's your, like, do you like one more than the other? Is there something you like specifically about one of those that you don't get in the other?
You know, I think that single player for this game in particular is going to kind of outshine multiplayer. And that's just because it is so story driven, and it's really, really hard to kind of hit that no matter how hard you try. Once you get a bunch of fools together that are playing, this goes for D&D too. You have multiple personalities sitting around a D&D table or a Housewood design table. Et cetera, et cetera.
Housewood design. Get your wood on.
Thank you for that spot. It just, things go on tangents, things get derailed, things go haywire, and sometimes, you know, as a DM, it's like herding cats sometimes. So when you have a single player experience with this game in particular, the story is really kind of flourishes, and that's really the only way, I think, truthfully, unless you have, you know, if you're couch co-op or split screen with someone you love, if you're playing, you know, with your hubby, your wife, or with a kid, you know, even it, then you could probably go through it. And actually, I don't know if I'd want to play this game with a child, but
maybe a teenager or
not
a late
the way I end
teenager.
up playing, but yeah, maybe a teen. But it's unless you have that sort of situation going on, I think, and that's not to downplay multiplayer at all, because it's so much fun. Like, we've had a blast playing that way. But to really experience this game truthfully as a story and as a role-playing game, quote unquote, I think single player kind of takes the cake, unfortunately. But it's apples and oranges. It really is. And multiplayer is just more fun. It is more like sitting around with your friends playing D&D and just doing wacky, wild, bonkers things, as Sonny would say. But yeah, it is apples and oranges. So I don't know what your thoughts are.
Mine is very simple, and it's that I'm glad I am playing a single player playthrough. Well, sure, but I'm glad that I'm further in my single player playthrough than my multiplayer, because when you play multiplayer, like you're not going to get anywhere if there's 4 of you trying to all experience it for the first time. Mm-hmm. So having played single player first, like, we can kind of skip through stuff, skip through like cutscenes and whatever else.
Yeah.
And then another big part of it is with a 4-player multiplayer, like you don't get any of the romance options with the origin characters, as far as I can tell. And 2, I don't know if the story on each of those origin characters is going to progress unless you play as one. But if you all 4 make custom characters, I don't know that you'll really get very far with those origin character stories in a multiplayer because you're not taking them with you in your adventures. But the nice thing is, like, if you were to play with just 2 people or just 3 people and you include 1 or 2 of those origin characters, you know, you're kind of getting the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
And again, if you just play as an origin character, like you'll get the story beats that way. But yeah, the fact is, like, for this type of game, like a CRPG, the multiplayer is extremely well done. Just the ability to go and do separate things in the world at the same time.
Yeah.
Or come together and help each other out, like we experienced in our multiplayer session, which we're going to get to right after you give us the rundown on who each of us, what's the cast, who are each of us playing for multiplayers.
No, right. Introduction to our multiplayer cast, sponsored by Hasbro.
Just kidding, Hasbro.
Just
don't
kidding.
Sue us.
Just kidding, Hasbro. Don't. Unless you want to.
No, please.
So we're going to have, first up, Coniff.
Yes.
Playing I don't know your sub race of dwarf, but it's a dwarf monk.
4 elements. I just picked it. And like at the very end of our last session. Yep.
Just picked it. Okay. So 4 elements monk named Fists.
Yep. He's a dwarf. He's bald. He's got a beard, and he's got a tattoo of like runes on his eye. He's great.
And then I am playing, as our community has 1, and I am playing a deep gnome druid.
Okay.
Named Zoza.
But what's the important bit about her?
She is also taking the Dark Urge character backstory. She looks like she crawled out of a death metal video, being
just a bit
an Oompa Loompa. So yeah, an Oompa Loompa, actually more like a Smurf that crawled out of a death metal video. She's fairly terrifying looking for being so little, but yeah, she has yet to be punted. So that'll happen at some
not
point.
off a cliff yet, but you were. I have video evidence of you getting thrown twice already.
Yeah, I think I've been thrown. And then our friend Jeff, Beta Race, playing an elf ranger named Legos.
Who looks surprisingly similar to Legolas.
Yes. Very Orlando Bloom. And then we also have our buddy Tempest, who's playing Karlak, the origin character, who's a tiefling barbarian. So,
yep.
And very fiery.
Very fiery.
Love her.
It's a fun cast of characters. I think the classes, it's a nice balance. I guess you're a caster, right? Like you'd say, like magic spell. Are you wielding a staff?
I think she's wielding. She found a scimitar and a shield.
I guess I'm wielding a staff, but a monk, I don't think that really matters too much.
Unless I get a magical staff. I'm thinking about kind of respecking her to a little bit more peely druidy kind of thing.
After that one encounter in the catacombs.
Yeah. So just to help out, because I think originally our buddy Jeff was going to roll a cleric, and then he shows up with the ranger. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be fairly easy for me to just go to old Rotsalot and respec. Actually, we need to, I need to. I'm gonna need some gold. Actually, I'm gonna have to hit up Tempest.
No, it's 100 to respec, I think.
Yeah, but I had a hard time just buying a pair of pants. So
That's true, but you can steal gold from people as long as their inventories are unlocked. I found that out the fun way.
well, all right. Noted.
What are some of your favorite moments so far, Shiloh? Now, I did want to mention for the listener, we are going to have we're streaming these sessions. If I can figure out the freaking stream settings so the quality isn't garbage, but we're streaming them every Monday night when we have them, and that'll be on my Twitch channel, Coniff Live. But if you don't want to watch live, or it's 3 hours is too long, as it's almost too long for us, let's be honest, I am recording it and I am making a highlight video of our adventures. And so if you are listening to this episode early, the morning it releases, same day will be the part 1 of our Baldur's Gate 3 with friends playthrough. That you can watch on YouTube. So you'll actually get to experience or see what we're talking about in some of these most memorable moments, because they're quite exciting. But what is your favorite, Shiloh?
I guess my favorite would... I'm going to have to say the cat was pretty funny. Actually, my two of them both involve Tempest. So Karlak, who's played by Tempest, picks up Legos, who's our buddy Jeff's ranger, has an ability to basically find a familiar companion, and he had chosen a cat, and Tempest picked it up, the cat, and what, he threw it at you?
No, actually, I picked it up.
Oh, you picked it up.
And I threw it at him thinking, oh, well, what's that going to do? It's just going to bounce off Karlak, be pissed, maybe hiss at me. No.
Nope.
It straight up died.
Rip.
Which I guess it was a manifestation cat, so it wasn't a real cat anyway, right? Like,
I don't know.
I did not expect that to happen.
PETA is not going to come down.
And of course it did damage to Karlak, and so Tempest is like, what? What happened? So it's just fun. Like, not only can you pick up and do silly stuff like that, but like the whole throwing part of this game is just hilarious. Like you have to have the strength to throw things. So I think you're the only character that can be thrown because you're
so little.
Yeah, and my dwarf is too stocky for Karlak.
Too stout. Yeah.
But yeah, I saw that cat sitting there, and my own dark urge was like, pick that up and throw it at Tempest. And I did, and goodbye, cat.
Yeah. That is the best with Karlak as a player in your party. As a barbarian, you can kind of have an extra bonus action where you can pick up and throw stuff at random. It's so every once in a while I'll just be like, what can I pick up around here? But you can also, it'll bring up your inventory too, so you can just throw something from your inventory if you want. And I guess depending on what it is, it depends on how much damage you do. But I remember one time with her, there was a potted almost like a plant pot.
Okay.
Like a not concrete, because they don't have concrete in the world, but some sort of stone plant pot that I picked up and just threw at a goblin, and ended up just doming it, and it went flying. I was like, this is great. This is going to be... Sorry, Gale, but you're out of the party.
Yeah, he didn't win you over, huh?
No. And then the next... Okay, so this one is definitely Tempest. So we're in this catacomb very early in the game. I won't try to avoid spoilers, but there's a moment where there's a room with a bunch of traps, and we had all been through this in our single player
Yeah.
through, and Tempest's like, "Hey, I got this, guys," and so we're all standing around waiting for
Not
Tempest
Jeff,
to,
though. He was smart and was way off
got out of the
in
way.
another room. Yeah.
So, all right, so you and I are just standing there waiting for Tempest to disarm his traps, and he hits a button. And the entire room goes off of these. It looks like have you ever seen a gas-powered walk flame?
Yep.
That's basically, or just jet engines were just shot out from every direction. Just instantly roasted. My poor gnome and Connell's poor dwarf. And Tempest is, and he's just standing there because he's playing Karlak, who's, I don't know if she takes half
She
fire
takes
damage.
half damage. Yeah.
Yeah, with fire, just standing there, just enjoying the sun. So
Enjoying the barbecue that she initiated.
yeah, luckily they got us up. But
Yeah. We were toast, literally, and we
Yeah.
had to use Revivify scrolls to bring us back. And this was after we almost made the mistake of getting into combat and wiping without having hit F5 at all up until that point. So
oh yeah,
that would have been a disaster. Though I think there are a few autosaves, but
yeah. Jeez.
I think my favorite was just kind of annoying was there's a pack of harpies outside of a particular area, and they obviously harpies will sing a song and lure unsuspecting victims into their clutches. And so there's a kid tiefling that's hearing the song, and you can go talk to it, but then the harpies start up their song, and then you yourself can get lured by the song, which basically it makes you unable to do any actions, I think. I know that's at least the effect that happened to me. And so every single time, and of course all four of us are down here, and Tempest has hopped up onto their nest to try to fight him, and Jeff the ranger is off to the side shooting him. Me, the monk, melee combat, I'm just standing down there next to the kid, completely dazed. And then finally, they would hit, break the concentration of the one singing, and I'd be like, great. And by the time the harpy that would get right before my turn, there'd be a harpy that would go, and then it would start singing, and I'm dazed again. And so I literally did absolutely nothing this entire fight. And then finally at the end, on the last harpy, Karlak breaks the concentration, and I'm like, yes, I can finally do something. As Jeff shoots it with an arrow and kills it. And I was like, no, I waited my entire... And the best part about this is that I had just leveled up and got to pick the Way of the Four Elements monk. So I had a whole, 3 new spells that I wanted to actually try out in combat.
You're ready to go.
And I could do nothing. So it was
so weird. You must have failed every save, which I think would have been wisdom, which I think you would have had a fairly high wisdom being a monk. But
I know I'm really high in dexterity. Okay. I don't remember. I'd have to look it up.
Do you any good with?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's a save versus wisdom.
Well,
the harpies.
Mr. Fists is not too wise.
I guess. I don't know. That's funny.
Yeah. So, and like I said, the whole highlights will be up on my YouTube channel the day that this episode releases. So that's at Coniff on YouTube. And it's 40-some minutes. I managed to whittle down our 3-hour session into 40 minutes. So
nice.
Yeah, more bite-sized moments from our experience. Yeah. So yes, sir.
All right. Should we get into spoilers?
Yeah, slight spoilers, like we gave the little disclaimer to earlier, but
yeah. So we
this is from the single player campaign, right?
From our single player campaign. This will be nothing basically past Act 1. So if you're not through Act
none of my
1,
stuff
if you just started the game,
Act 2.
Maybe fast forward, stop the podcast now, or come back to it later, and then you can listen to this. But
Yes. But again,
we're gonna talk a little spoiler.
it's going to be mostly locations and maybe some enemies and stuff.
Yeah,
from
things
early
that
on.
things that have happened that we kind of some highlights from our single player
Yep.
playthroughs that we just wanted to talk about, and we'd love to hear some memorable things that you guys have done
Yes.
too. So it's lots of them. But why don't you go ahead and lead off, because
Okay.
I've got a few that are going to be interesting. But
I think so. I've mentioned I have Gale in my party, and I've also mentioned that he's in robes, which is not armor, and he's a great wizard. Absolutely, he's also great at dying, and so later into Act 1, after you're done in kind of the wilderness and the grove and all that, you end up in one of the options, I guess, is you end up in the Underdark. And the Underdark is a huge part of the Forgotten Realms, as what I've been learning about in these episodes. And again, next episode, Shiloh's going to do a bit of a lore dive into the Underdark. And so I'm experiencing this, and I'm like, okay, I see why Shiloh likes it. There's mushrooms in all sorts of locations. Like it's like Blackreach from Skyrim times 10. It's a really neat location, but within probably 10 minutes of being in the Underdark, I had a total party wipe. So then you reload, and like, okay, I guess I won't go that way. And then next thing you know, Gale's getting yeeted off into the chasms by it was called a bullet,
yeah,
some rock beast that would burrow underground or something. So eventually it attacked me like 3 separate times before running, away, and I got out of combat. The final time it actually saved me, and then I killed it in as a thanks. But I stumbled across these minotaurs, and I was like, they're like 75 to 90 HP, level 6, and I was like only level 5, and I'm like, oh, I don't know, there's 2 of them, I don't know if I can take them. And stubborn me decides to fight them anyway, and as I luckily each of my characters has pretty high initiative and everything, so they all go first and then the enemies go. And as the last person, who's Gale, goes, all of a sudden the ground rumbles and up comes this bullet right underneath one of the minotaurs. I'm like, nice. So they start fighting, and so you've got my group of 4 people, blasting these things. Gale gets knocked off again into a chasm, freaking another 200 gold to withers. And it was a really exciting fight, and I finally killed it. And I don't even remember what I got, because that wasn't important. What was important was the fun.
4 gold and
Yeah.
a handshake.
And so also in the Underdark, there's this river, and it has a name, and I don't remember what it was called, but one of the parts you take a boat to another part of the Underdark. Well, halfway through this boat ride, you get sidelined by another boat. And in this encounter, it's like a cutscene, you had borrowed this boat from some Drugar dwarves, or Dweger. How do you pronounce that?
I pronounce it Duergar, but
Okay.
I've heard it pronounced lots of different.
Those dwarves.
Those
Anyway,
dark dwarves.
some more, show up on a boat and sideline you, and depending on your choices, you may end up in combat with them, which is what I did. And so I was on a boat next to another boat, having boat-to-boat combat with it was like a 4 dwarves and a gnome or something in my party. And it was just a really cool encounter, especially because I used Shadowheart to push some guy off the boat, and down he went into the drink. But it's just a really cool encounter. And so everything about the I really liked what you do in the wilderness. A lot of cool moments, like with the owl bear, or with with Raphael, just stuff that pops up here and there. But the coolest so far for me has been this place called the Grim Forge. And I won't get into the story beats of what's there and stuff, but next to it or attached to it is an adamantine forge. And adamantine, as I understand it, is one of the most, I guess, the strongest materials for armor and weapons in the Forgotten Realms, or at least in this area of it. And so if you pay attention and play it right, you can craft items through this forge. To do so will end up triggering one of the hardest fights in the entire game up to that point. And I figured out a way to beat it that was very exciting, and I managed to get, make armor and then a shield for Shadowheart.
Ooh, nice.
And so that's why, again, I want this helmet that that particular boss dropped, so she can wear it, and then she's just completely decked out, and then can just carry my party to victory. So, but yeah, I don't know if you stumbled across that particular encounter or not, but
no, because I did not go that way.
Okay,
Which is
nice.
odd, but I guess that would lead me to my first. It's going to be really hard to talk about this without too many spoilers, but let's just say that I have Lae'zel in my party, and at the time I had Shadowheart in my party as well.
Okay.
They do not like each other. This is established scene 1 of the game.
Yeah, first time you encounter Shadowheart, Lae'zel's not a
she's
fan.
on the Nautiloid ship, and Lae'zel and her instantly just at odds. Like, she doesn't trust Githyanki. Lae'zel doesn't trust her. This goes on, and it's an interesting battle between them both. And I'm basically playing Mother Hen with my half drow warlock, trying to just placate both of them at the same time. Eventually, things get heated.
Interesting.
And let's just say Shadowheart isn't in my party anymore.
Oh no. Oh no. It's okay, Shadowheart. You're alive in
Shadowheart
mine.
ended up. I went to camp, and there's a cut scene with Shadowheart looming over Lae'zel with a knife, and I basically had to kind of. I was presented lots of different choices, and I ended up kind of siding with Lae'zel, and it ended up like a full-on brawl. And yeah, rip, pretty much.
All right.
So that was the most interesting. I was like, wow, that went from 1 to 11 really, really fast. But yeah, it was very interesting. So now my character has the artifact.
What's amazing to me is how early on in the game these type of interactions can happen. You know what I mean? Somehow everybody in my camp is on good terms with each other, or at least mutually respected terms. I have all the origin characters plus a few side characters that have shown up. And but I'm a bard, so it kind of makes sense when you could picture take Jaskier or Dandelion from The Witcher. Or, again, Edgin from Honor Among Thieves. That's what bards do. We just, we bring people together and keep them from offing each other in the middle of the night.
Well, my warlock has great charisma. So it was just one of those things. It was bound to happen. And it was, there could have been maybe a option to where things had kind of quieted down, but I had a feeling that was just
delaying the inevitable.
Yeah, it was just a pot waiting to boil. It was, and it boiled.
All right, what else?
Yeah, my second favorite little moment was the Anti-Ethel quest line.
Oh, yes.
Did you do this?
Yes, I absolutely did. That's what
This
the whole BOMB situation was about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that is a really, really interesting, fun. It reminded me a lot of the hags from Witcher 3.
Yep.
It had this. I mean, it's very, very Hansel and Gretel.
Yep.
From the apples, the poison apples that lead you into this swamp that if you didn't really fully explore all of the first area, you would be like, where was this the entire time? Like I finally got out that way and I was like, oh wow, this is creepy, but it looks beautiful at first, and it's all an illusion.
Illusion is raised.
But it's a very, very.
It's like the coolest looking swamp in an RPG I've seen, and again, probably just beating out the swamp from The Witcher 3, where the three crones are.
Yeah,
and that whole quest line in Witcher 3 is fantastic. But
that's great.
But yeah, in this game,
but this one was
special.
Really, really good. And this one was wacky and wild and demented. It was really, really interesting. A lot of fun. Kind of had me at the seat. I mean, man, it was great.
Yeah,
to finally get that done, and like,
the fight was a challenge too.
The fight was a challenge. Not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it was.
No, I think it only took me 3. Like the first time, I realized that okay, I'm gonna get smoked. Second time, I was doing pretty well, and then I made a mistake, and then which was my character was standing too close to an edge, and guess who went into the chasm? My character. from Auntie Ethel. But so then the third time I managed to beat it, and I was like, yeah, that was a fun fight. So
yeah.
And then the conclusion of that, which I won't spoil, I don't think we've seen the last of that quest line.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah.
That's all we'll really say about that.
Yeah.
I was going to talk about the Book of Thay, but I'm not going to really talk about that because there's a lot of questions with that.
Well, and the thing too is I have no idea what that is. Like, my playthrough, no clue, no idea. So that's really neat that like even with my play, there's parts where they're just completely different. Like again, you knew nothing, really about any of the Underdark stuff that I talked about.
No, because I went the Mountain Pass route.
Yes.
Which is fairly new, and it led to lots of interesting things with Lae'zel. That was the main reason why I chose the Mountain Pass, because she is pretty adamant about finding this Githyanki Kresh, as she calls it, is the answer to trying to get the tadpole out of your head. Well, let's just say it didn't go too well.
Yeah.
But I guess my last one would be completely decimating the goblin camp. I had no intentions of doing this, but let's just say things got ramped up, and it was a little hard to leave without.
It was a bit out of your control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So eventually, I had to call the ogres from the Whispering area.
Oh yeah.
And they helped out a little bit.
I have forgotten about them, and I still have the horn in my inventory, and I'm wondering if I should try it.
I will tell you this, you can use it, and then if they live, you can talk to them again, and they'll offer the same services for a fee, so you can multi-use the horn. I'm guessing it'll just kind of escalate up and up and up and up. But
interesting. Yeah. I need to use it. I just keep forgetting I have it.
But we're already on spoilers, so
yeah.
But yeah, but those are a few. I mean, I did a lot of play today. Got through the Mountain Pass. Now I'm into Act 2 and into the Shadow area is what we'll call it for now.
Shadow Cursed Lands. Yes.
Just met a very prominent old Baldur's Gate character that we won't talk about, and also noticed another old Baldur's Gate character in a certain guest book. So one of those things where you check in. So
interesting. I know what I'm going to be doing when I play next. Going to read a
But
book.
yeah, I guess that's the end of our little spoilers section. So
Yeah. What do we have? Is it it's the book report, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, let's
we
go.
have a little book report.
Let's go.
All right, class, settle down. It's time for book reports. Shiloh, why don't you kick us off?
One of these days, I'll do a book report.
All right.
You're always kicking it off.
Well, this is a book that I haven't read yet. I've started to read, and I'm enjoying it so far, but I haven't fully read this book. But I wanted to pick this book because it does get pretty good reviews, and it also kind of ties into what kind of the Harpers. So the Harpers are mentioned in the game as well as in the movie, the most recent movie. But the Harpers are a pretty big part of this book series. And this book series of Harpers, is what they call the Harper books, are multi-author. So there's different tie-ins from different book series. This book series ties into the Harper books, but it's kind of a collection of Harper stories that are, told by different authors. So this one in particular is called Elf Shadow by Elaine Cunningham. And I'll give a little synopsis here, and you can see if you want to pick this one up. But so far, I'm enjoying it. An undercover agent and a half-elf assassin join forces to bring a killer to justice in this first installment of the Song and Sword series set in the Forgotten Realms. Silent Death stalks the Harpers of Faerun, a semi-secret society dedicated to preserving justice and peace in the realms. One by one, the Harpers are falling to the blade of an enigmatic killer, and every victim has associations with Aerun Moonblade. A half-elven fighter and Harper agent, Aerun's surname derives from the magical sword she wields. But even after she's tasked with finding the murderer, there are many who believe she is the true culprit. Enter Danilo Than, a bard who enjoys Arian's quest after they meet in Waterdeep. Though Danilo plays the fool, he is secretly a capable Harper agent and mage, charged with determining Arian's innocence and uncovering the secrets of her powerful Moonblade. Together, the unlikely duo set out to save the Harpers, embarking on a magical, action-packed adventure that launches an exciting new story in the Forgotten Realms universe.
This sounds really interesting. And I think it's because the Harper name actually rings a bell, because I watched Honor Among Thieves like 4 times at this point. And I, of course, like watching Honor Among Thieves, no clue what they were. But then having watched it, having an idea, and then getting to where I'm at currently in BG3, there's a bit of a mystery there with it, And so they make maybe an appearance. I don't know, but
So this don't let the cover of this book fool you. I don't mean to slander this book at all, but the cover is really kind of terrible,
underwhelming.
So, yeah, compared to some other covers that are out there that are much better. But this, don't let the cover fool you.
Well, the story sounds great.
Yeah, the story is really, really well done, and there's some gray areas. Anytime you kind of involve Harpers, there's always a little bit of gray, because I guess you akin to them maybe sort of like the FBI of Faerun to a degree, but not necessarily just the United States. It would be like if the world had an FBI, it would be sort of that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Of all the books you've talked about so far, this is the one that has piqued my interest the most. So
really, if you're a Shadowheart fan, you probably enjoy the Erebus Kale.
Well, that too, but I like the part of this in the plot, I guess, summary that you read, or not summary, but tease, is that the bard is also a Harper agent that is basically not spying on Erlyn, but that's part of his mission. So
yeah, it's really good so far. So there we go.
Well, that was a pretty a feature complete episode. That's the word of the day. So, any final thoughts, Shiloh, on anything we've talked about today at all?
No. Excited to kind of delve back into the Underdark. Hopefully, I can convince you guys that that's the route we need to go on our multiplayer session. So I actually get to see it, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to go back there in my storyline, in my single player through. I mean, I could save scum and go back to some save that I had before, and maybe, but I don't want to do that. So we'll see. If you guys don't want to do that, then we can go the mountain pass route. That's fine.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll just have to take a vote, I suppose. But yeah, we're gonna dive into the Underdark next episode, and probably have a few more adventures to tell, and we'll see where else we'll go. But,
yes, I'm excited about the Underdark thing, because I want to kind of get into some of the lore, like some of the events that have happened there and everything. So,
yeah,
not just in the game, but in the Forgotten Realms in general. But yeah, next episode, we're going to dive into more of what our multiplayer adventures become. So, thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you in the next episode. Peace.
Thanks, everyone. Questing the Multiverse is brought to you in part by Coniff Productions, Hal's Wood Designs, and Joel Crawford. To follow along with our adventures, please follow us on Twitter at QTM Podcast, and consider joining our Discord, a link of which can be found in the show notes or in our Twitter bio. Want your questions or comments read on the show? Email us at questingthemultiverse@gmail.com. Finally, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a review or a follow wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening.